All right, sorry. Having even more issues than normal. It was not wanting to connect me, but I think I have it now. Please let me be live somewhere. Looks like I am good on YouTube. I'm gonna hop over to Facebook. There are people watching, so that makes me think something's happening. I need to get the chat up. So if you're logging in, let me know that you can see me. Let me know that you can hear me. And we'll get started. I'm trying to get the chat up. I'm so sorry, you guys. This is like having to use my phone and my computer because I couldn't connect on the computer because there's like a windstorm happening. So we're getting there. Promise. I have lots of people logging in, so that's good. I just need to be able to see your comments. All right. I'm also live on Facebook. That is so great. That makes everything so much better. I have your comments coming in. This is working beautifully. I'm so happy. Okay. It doesn't take much. I'm going to try to stop sticking my hands in the camera. Okay. Obstacle focus versus handler focus. I kind of selfishly wanted to talk about this because I'm building this webinar workshop series on this topic. So a webinar on kind of just the broad overview of obstacle versus handler focus and like what are we looking for, and then a couple of workshops diving deeper into what you might do to create more obstacle focus and what you might do to create more handler focus. And those workshops give me the opportunity to work with a handful of teams on some specific exercises that kind of go beyond just my regular foundation, what I might do to create a balanced dog. So tonight I want to talk about kind of everything I can talk about, and whatever questions you have kind of fuels those upcoming webinars and workshops as well. So not only do I want to have this conversation to help you guys right now, I also want this conversation to make my future products better for everyone. So thank you in advance for your questions because I know they'll be fantastic. That being said, I have my notes here, my handy dandy notebook. So first, let's define obstacle focus. Okay. Obstacle focus in my mind is the dog's ability to seek out obstacles without the handler like taking them to it. So yes, of course, the handler is going to put the dog on the correct line, correct obstacle on that line, but obstacle focus means the dog is actively kind of selecting those obstacles on their line without a ton of extra prompting. Okay. It's just, oh, look, I'm on this street and there's a jump and a tunnel and an A-frame on this street. I'm going to take those 3 obstacles unless I'm told to turn and take a different street. Okay. In general, we want a slightly higher obstacle focus than handler focus because we don't want to have to go everywhere and be close to all the obstacles, right? We want to be able to put a dog on a path and expect them to stay on that path and take the obstacles on that path until we tell them to go to a different path. Okay. So, like, the perfect ideal balance might be 60% obstacle focus and 40% handler focus. So let's define what handler focus is. Handler focus is the ability to listen to instruction from the handler, whether it's about slowing down, which way to turn, which obstacle to take on that street that they're on. It's the ability to take direction when you're looking, when there are other things maybe drawing your focus away. That's kind of what I think of handler focus, is that they know you're there, right? That would be like the bare minimum. They know you're there. Then maybe a little bit more handler focus is they know you're there and they listen when there's not something better on their line. Better being probably attached to their reinforcement history, of course, right? Then too much handler focus would mean that they only watch and listen for the handler's instructions. They don't actively seek out obstacle focus. So that's why we want a little less handler focus. You want just enough handler focus that when you do want to change the path that your dog is on, they can go, yeah, I really like the path that I'm on. It ends in a tunnel, but I also know that following your instructions leads to reinforcement and hopefully also a tunnel, right? That's what we want. So those are kind of my definitions and the goal of this scale. You know, anytime I think like balance, I visualize a scale, right? Trying to balance those two things. I'm going to grab this question. Would the workshops be suitable for a 6-month-old puppy? I'm going to say probably. Ask me again in about a month when I completely finish drawing them out. But I'm going to say probably, because there's a lot you can do without actual obstacles. And assuming Torch is still here, he'll be doing as much of it as possible, because why not? I have at my disposal a dog that's new to all these skills, and that's always going to be a better demo than Shrek, and definitely a better demo than Shock. Though Shock is going to be a really great demo for increasing handler focus, because she always needs more. She's certain that I am not a necessary entity on an agility course. Right, like ins and tunnel, insert your dog's favorite obstacle here. For Smack, it would be the weave poles. I always have to handle when there's weave poles in his path. I always have to handle differently than if there's a tunnel in his path. So whatever your dog's favorite thing is, complete that sentence with that obstacle. Okay, so let's talk about examples, and maybe you can share them in the chat. Examples of too high handler focus. What does the dog do when the handler focus is too high? Okay, when the handler focus is too high, I see these dogs that they don't look away from the handler until they're on top of the obstacle. So this is the handler having to go basically touch every single obstacle, and the dog finally looking when they're out of probably self-preservation, because if they don't commit to the obstacle at that point, they're going to be running into it. Okay, so that's what I see when the handler focus is too high. They're late to commit. They maybe get more refusals. And then what's the trickle down effect of that? Well, if you've heard me talk about the timing loop and heard me talk about all these prerequisite skills that you need for good time, if your dog isn't committing to obstacles, you can't give cues in a timely fashion. So what happens, unfortunately, is when you have two, I'm sorry, my fingers are in the camera. I'm trying to get it just like right so I can see the chat and the screen. So if the handler focus is too high and the dog isn't committing to obstacles, the handler keeps practicing late timing. And unfortunately, late timing decreases your obstacle focus. So if you start with too low, if you start with too much handler focus, you're not likely to run your way out of it, right? I hear it all the, not so much anymore, probably just the people I run with don't say this. The circles I'm involved in don't say it this way, but I used to hear all the time, oh, that's just a young dog thing, he'll grow out of it. And that, it kind of drives me a little bit bonkers, because that reinforcement drives behavior, not your age, not your time spent on it. Really, it's not your time. Experience doesn't drive behavior, reinforcement drives behavior. So it's going to be way easier to, if your handler focus is too high, it's going to be way easier to just increase your obstacle focus than to keep doing what you're doing and hope that the dog goes, oh, it would maybe be easier if I looked at the obstacle sooner. Okay, so that's what we want to get in on, what the actual issue is. Is the handler focus too high? Is the handler focus too low? And then we want to change what and how we're reinforcing to get the scales back at a manageable piece. So what happens if the obstacle focus is too high? Well, these are the dogs that they know you're there. You were essential to them gaining access to the ring, but now that their leash is off and you've released them from the start line, you don't matter anymore. You've given them the access that they need, and that's it. That's what happens when the obstacle focus is too high. You can't impact the path that they're on. Maybe their turns are really, really wide. Maybe they are really difficult to turn. Maybe it feels like you're having to cue things to obstacles back. And I think that is too much obstacle focus, because that timing is not sustainable. It's not, I don't think it's humanly possible. So that's kind of what I think of when obstacle focus is too high. It feel a good way to think about it is if you feel like you're fighting to keep your dog on course. If it feels like this is showing where I was born and raised and what I grew up doing, but if it feels like you are trying to reel a shark in on a fishing boat, it's too hard. Your obstacle focus is too high. If you have to stop a lot on course, like stop moving to get your dog's attention, to get your dog to turn at all, the obstacle focus is probably still is too high. You can also maybe, and then some, this is a good segue. I don't have this on my notes, so I have to add it. This is why I like talking about it, is that if you have to stop to get your dog to pay attention to you, is that too high obstacle focus or is that too high handler focus? Because if your dog is just driven kind of wild by your motion, is that too high handler focus? Maybe there might be something that about you and your cues, like your motion, that drives your dog to just whoom, go forward. So an extreme reaction to your motion, I think that's a little bit, is that too much handler focus or not enough handler focus? And I think it's a little bit of both, because if they have extreme reactions to your motion, they're obviously paying attention to you, but they're not paying attention to all of your other cues, like maybe your position or where you're looking or what your chest is doing or what your feet are doing. So maybe if they have so much reaction to motion, they're not even able to look at all the other cues that you're able to give. So we have to work even harder to balance those dogs out. And I have to write that down. What happens? Extreme reactions. I should write it down here. Okay, any questions so far? All right, we're doing good, I think. So then what does it look like if and this maybe is the same question, but what if the handler focus is too low, right? That's kind of the same as is it the same as the obstacle focus being too high? Maybe, maybe not. Because it might not be that it could be situational too. That maybe the dog has a really nice balance, except for this situation. We are going to get into some of the teaching phases for sure, and kind of just in general what I do. Get some of both. How do we work with that? Let's talk about work about it. Ooh, that's a good question. Genetics versus training. Obviously, we can't splice out one or the other completely. Because, for instance, like one of the things that I just know from having Shelties is that when I'm training them, barking and spinning at the same time is not allowed. So I of course taught spin to my Shelties, but I would usually teach behaviors in ways that don't include barking. And I always kind of found that the combination of barking and spinning in a Sheltie is a bad thing. It does not lead to anything good. And it certainly doesn't lead to anything good on an agility course. So that's one of those genetic, I don't know. It's one of those breed stereotypes that I'm aware of. So when I'm raising a Sheltie, and I'm going to talk about the breeds that I've had in my home. So don't worry, I'll pick on 3 breeds right now. Shelties, like in training, barking and spinning at the same time just isn't a thing. And I'm careful to not let it happen in any process of the training, like just sending to a toy. And who, even obviously it maybe is a function of frustration. I don't know. I'm going to try to avoid it. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it doesn't show up in my training, because I think it has an impact on how they can switch in between obstacle and handler focus. If they're confused about that, that's when I would see the barking and spinning from Shelties. Then Border Collies. One thing that I really look for in Border Collies when I'm raising them is that, are they stalking their toys? When I start to use toys as reinforcers, or even food bowls, when I start to use pre-placed reinforcers on the ground, if they're creeping towards them, I'm like, the moment I see it, I'm going to try and build a training plan to fix it, to teach a different behavior that goes against their instincts. The same is to be said for flanking the toy. If they can't run in a straight line to their toy or to their food robot or to their bowl of food, I'm going to do everything I can to try and build up a straight line behavior. And I was successful with that with Smack. I'm pretty certain the entire herding world would be incredibly embarrassed at Smack's outrun. He doesn't have one. He only can go in a straight line. He doesn't know how to flank. He only goes straight. And he comes from a very, 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 very nice herding pedigree, like really famous dogs. But Shock, I wasn't successful. I did all the exact same things with her. And she flanks so much, and it is so annoying, and it is what it is. I took that training as far as I could, and now I kind of, at that point, I said, well, looks like we're not changing her. I need to adapt my handling system so that she understands it and it works within what she's bringing to the table. So there is a little bit that you just can't change. I mean, the terrier's easy, right? Like, the thing I don't allow is like intense sniffing, or digging. Like, I wouldn't want digging in training. But what's something else that I don't really know. He doesn't have any of those like weird behaviors that make him hard for him to follow my handling. He doesn't have that, so I can't really pick on him tonight. So that's kind of the answer of genetics versus training. It can be hard. There's definitely a line and a threshold of how much I'm willing to try and change who the dog is. Guinness is a good example of those extreme reactions. Okay. We are going to now, I want to, before we talk about building obstacle focus or building handler focus, I also want to bring up a really good point that is maybe going to open up the rabbit hole, because and don't worry, I'm not done with this topic, but it keeps coming up in the group about this, what verbals do I need? Do I need this verbal? Do I need that verbal? And I think this sort of helps answer that question. But when we're talking about a nice obstacle handler focus balance, I mentioned that we kind of want 60% obstacle focus, 40% handler focus. That's kind of that's kind of the starting point, because we also have to consider different handling styles and different handler types. If you are a really fast runner and you can most of the time maintain a really, really good speed and stay ahead of your dog the entire time, you're faster than your dog and it's all good, you can get away with less obstacle focus because you can do a little bit more for the dog. Okay. The flip side of that is that if you cannot run, you do not run, you choose to not run for whatever reason, then you need the obstacle focus to be a little bit higher. Okay, so your handling style is going to kind of feed into that balance a little bit more. Okay. With a little bit of distance handling, you need a little bit more obstacle focus because you're not going to be there with as much motion and with a good position. So you need that dog to be seeking out and completing the obstacles more independently than if you were running next to them 100% of the time. Are you eating that? Don't. It's shock tonight. So she has a tennis ball. Okay. We're all good. Caught up on comments. Okay. So let's think about, how do we build obstacle focus? We're going to build obstacle focus mostly by you get what you reinforce. I mean, for both of these, the answer is through really good reinforcement strategies and placement of reward and things like that. But specific obstacle focus exercises, the first one that I usually teach to dogs is like offering the jump. So teaching them that looking at the jump is a reinforceable behavior, and then continuing to take the jump is a reinforceable behavior. Sending them to rewards first. Sending them to a reward is your first obstacle, right? Because if you're doing your job right, you're eventually going to transfer the value of that reward to the obstacles. So the first thing that they need to learn is to be able to look forward, focus on, and continue to a toy on the ground, or a bowl of food on the ground, or a robot. Whatever it is, they need to be able to look away from you and continue to it wherever you, and then regardless of what you're doing with your body, right? Stopping, running away, running past, running to the side. You need to see that they can, once they are given the instruction to go to a thing, that they can continue to the thing no matter what you are doing, because you are the dog's biggest distraction on the agility course. So we need to teach them how to, hey, Shock, come here. We need to teach them how to kind of, or when to focus on the obstacle and when to focus on us. And that does to come from good handling practices, that your end of the deal is that once you put the dog on the line to an obstacle, you will allow them to continue and take that obstacle. And then you'll be on time giving them the next information and the next information and the next information. Okay. But building obstacle focus, I think is the easy one, because it's the things that we do are pretty intuitive. Put the reward on the ground, send the dog to the reward, do a bunch of straight lines. If you took my my handling class, Smooth Moves, the one before this current one, then we spent like a week and a half just building up that dog's ability to look forward and go forward as fast as they can. That seems pretty intuitive, right? Building handler focus. If you've either built too much obstacle focus, or you've got a dog that's kind of naturally obstacle focused and then you built more on top of that, building handler focus can be a bit more tricky, because dogs like to run. Dogs like to do the obstacles. Dogs like to be an extension. And typically, if the obstacle focus is too high, it's super reinforcing for them to continue down that path. Okay. So again, with your reinforcement strategies, if your obstacle focus is too high, then you need to maybe reward from your hand every single time for a week, 2 weeks, a month. I don't know. It's going to be different for every dog. There's also going to be some things that you're going to want to test to kind of see, is my dog's obstacle focus really too high, or am I just late with everything? Because that's not fair. If your dog is going off course, you first have to evaluate, is he following the handling or not? So we're going to start there with some basic following the handling exercises. Really, really simple stuff. Just let's go back to that reward on the ground. And so you've got a reward on the ground and the dog is, there's the camera, reward on the ground, dog is sitting here, and you're going to be in the middle, and you're going to turn to look over the opposite shoulder so the dog can see the reward behind you, and then you're going to call the dog to your side and then send them to the reward. Can they do that? If they can do that, because it's really easy to be on time with that sort of setup. Okay, so if they can do that, then we're going to make those following the handling exercises more and more challenging until it starts to be dependent on your timing. Because if the dog's going off course because you sent them off course, well, then we don't need to fix them. You're actually going to like their obstacle focus when we do correct your timing. Okay, that's really the one where you have to be careful that sometimes it's not too much handler focus. Sometimes it's just a timing issue. But if there really is too much obstacle focus, we're going to start with just rewarding from the hand. We're going to play some games around not taking the obstacles. Okay, so that might mean that, I mean, this is the case for Shock. And if she were actively competing, or if I was looking to actively compete with her, I would do this. Turns out she's not, so I don't really care that much right now. But she is the type of dog that when I let her out of the car and she's off leash, she will go start taking obstacles. Okay. And her obstacle focus is sometimes a little bit too high. It's not unmanageable, so I don't worry about it too much. But maybe the first thing I would try with a dog like Shock is that she's on a leash. I would start managing those behaviors where they are getting reinforced for taking obstacles that you don't want them to take. And that also includes in your exercises. So if you have that kind of dog that when you give them their toy, they just start running around and they take obstacles while they're running around, well, you got to change your reinforcement strategy to be a tighter game of just play between you and the dog, and set them up so that they don't have access to obstacles between the repetitions. So a little bit of management is going to go a long way there. Okay, because what the dog is thinking is, oh, you're moving around on the field, I should be taking obstacles. Well, that's not it, right? You want to have really clear, we're doing agility now, we're not doing agility now. So getting those things really solid with just some management things. Put a leash in your pocket and put the leash on the dog to be able to move from the end of one sequence to the beginning of the other, and that'll go a long ways. From there are some other things that we can do, but they're a little bit more, they're more like trainer prescribed, not do this, then do this, then do this, because I'm also going to test, can the dog just hang out near obstacles and not feel the intense need to take them. So again, Smack, I can be doing agility a downstay, I can start moving equipment, I can start talking to someone else, I can demo things, and he'll just chill. He doesn't have this intense need to interact with equipment, even if I'm interacting with the equipment. He can be moving around. I could have him out at a class that I was teaching, and I could demo something with him, give him his toy, let him know he's on a break, and I could actually start demoing the same handling without him, and he would not take the obstacles. Okay, but Shock can't do that. I just was doing some virtual dog handling the course, then running it with her, and I had to have Graham hold her while I was walking the course without her, because she would be trying really, really hard to figure out which obstacles and why I wanted in trying to insert herself into the situation. She has this intense need to take obstacles. So those are the types of things that I would be testing, and I would be putting just a little bit more structure around when they can have access to the obstacles and when they can't, because these dogs that are too high obstacle focus, it's because like each obstacle is like a freaking gumball machine, man. They are just like, give me candy, give me candy, give me candy, give me candy. Well, they are reinforcers, so you need to be able to control access to their reinforcers, right? Just like when you're training something, you can either give them a cookie for that sit or you don't give them a cookie for that sit. But if you don't have control over when they take the tunnel or when they take the weaves, then you are going to have a hard time keeping them on course. So that's where I start with that. And then beyond that, like I said, it's kind of trainer prescribed. How much extra? Like for some dogs, we go as far as like informal healing around an agility course, not letting the dog take anything and then letting the dog take something and then asking the dog to come back in. That's extreme. That's an extreme case, and one that I don't have to use frequently. Like I can't remember the last time I needed to do that. But like I said, I really, 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 I test as much as I can to make sure that like what is the actual issue, because sometimes it's a timing issue, sometimes it's a structure issue of they just don't know that following you also leads to access to the reinforcers. Yeah, so in general, if you want to build some obstacle focus, getting the rewards out of your hand is what's going to help. Usually it's usually really, really fast. It doesn't take a lot once you build that obstacle focus. But is that obstacle focus or handler focus if they're trying to take part in your virtual walkthrough? Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I think it for her, I do think it's too high obstacle focus, because she's not like really following me in those virtual walkthroughs. She's just kind of circling me and taking obstacles. So in that case, I do think it's a almost like maybe I'm making this up, but it feels like she's desperate to take the obstacles. Other signs that your dog might be a little bit too high obstacle focus, or they don't understand when to not take obstacles, or the dogs that really, really quickly learn where the starting point is. Shock isn't quite this, but you finish a sequence and they run back to the start. Okay, so you finish the sequence and you reward them and they like take their toy right back to number one. Oof, I don't like that. Some people might like it, like it's efficient training, but I don't like it. I want the dog following me throughout the entire training session. Okay. Make sure you ask questions as we go along because I'm getting near the end. And then I'll turn it over to you guys. Yes, I think that was the same question as before. And yes, if you want to build obstacle focus, you put a food bowl out ahead and teach the dog to run ahead of you to the reward. Habits for maintaining a good balance. It's going to change, right? Especially if your dogs are young and impressionable. This is going to flip-flop for a while. So if you're working a lot of turns, your young dog might seem a little bit more handler focused. But then you start working on extension and going forward and maybe a little bit of distance skills, and then suddenly your young dog is super obstacle focused and you don't know what to do. It's allowed to change. The scales are allowed to flip-flop a little bit and they'll even out eventually. But habits for keeping a good balance is using a clever reinforcement strategy based on what you need. So if you've probably heard me say this before, but if you are sequencing, that means your dog knows how to commit to obstacles and stay committed to obstacles. If they don't know how to do that, you shouldn't be sequencing, because it will produce a dog that gets more refusals. It will produce a handler with poor timing. So you want to make sure that if everything is good to go, you know, you're training along, you're going along, you're training things, everything seems fine, but you get a refusal. Well, the very next repetition, I'm going to put a reward on the ground and make sure that that refusal doesn't happen again. Even if it might have been a little bit my fault. It's fine. It's totally fine. Just put the reward on the ground. Then you know 100% that they're going to take the jump. If you can improve your handling, improve your handling. And absolutely no harm is done by putting that reward on the ground. The very next repetition. Then you've got that same dog. You're going along. You're training. Everything's going fine. And oh no, he went off course. Well, what do? You need to test it first. You need to try to handle to that wrong course on purpose. Okay? Because then you're going to look at the video and go, oh, I totally sent him there the first time. Oops. Good dog. He was paying so good attention. He was totally following the handling. Or you'll find, he's a little bit confused. Or you'll find that, no, I did tell him to turn, but I was too late. Great. That's good information, because I don't want to tell my dog he was wrong for going where he was already headed because I didn't tell him in time, right? You wouldn't get mad so you're in the passenger seat. You wouldn't get mad at the driver for missing the turn because you told them after they already passed it, right? You're passing the turn and you go, hey, you were supposed to turn there. Okay. So then you also might find that your dog isn't following the handling. And then you increase the amount you are rewarding from your hand, and the dog will go, oh, right, you matter. Where you run matters. What you do with your chest matters. So you keep an eye on it by reacting to your mistakes in a clever way. Okay. That's how you keep a really good balance, is reacting to the mistakes as they are. They are valuable information. So what you do with that information makes it or breaks it, essentially. Is a good question. Are more verbals helpful for dogs with high handler focus? Back to verbals. It depends. How is it trained? Is it independent of your physical cues? I don't know. I think if you go through the effort to really truly train a verbal that is independent of you, then absolutely that's going to increase their obstacle focus, because when they hear a word, they know to look away from you, right? So sure, but just adding them isn't going to do anything. In fact, I see more dogs slow down when you just start chattering at them because it's not normal and they don't know what it means. And so the dogs are just like, I have no idea what they're doing. And I've been rewarding Ever for every obstacle she takes lately, even when I don't think she's following my handling. So you're building up a little bit of obstacle focus. You know, there's really no harm in giving the dog the benefit of the doubt. That's why if she goes off course and you reward her, which I think you should, you're both young enough in the game that it's not going to hurt anything. Like, honestly, reward her and then try to get her to that obstacle on purpose, because it could be that you're both right. I have that with Shock a lot. When I review my videos, I'm like, she's right, but also I'm right. Like, I didn't do it wrong, but I did do it wrong for her. Like I said, there are some things that I've had to change about my communication system with her to meet her needs of who she is. And so if I fall back into the habit of, well, this is perfect for every other dog on the friggin' planet, and she's like, not me, sorry. So I'll look at the video and go, well, I didn't do it wrong. I mean, I was totally right. Smack would have followed me, Shrek would have followed me, Skreek would have followed me, but I wasn't right for her. So it's always a good idea to just reward them anyways. I always feel terrible when I withhold reinforcement and then I watch the video and I'm like, ugh, you were totally right. And, you know, you're not going to hurt them by rewarding them. Awesome. If you can review the video and pinpoint things, that's the way to go. Then when you have too much obstacle focus with Dash, then you want to reward a little bit more from your hand in general. Okay. And then when you're using different reward strategies, you know, when I'm first teaching something, I'm usually going to use a pre-placed reward that kind of serves as a lure. So it's set up, the reward is set up on the correct line so that my dog's behavior matches what I'm about to cue. And so it's fine if they're just following where the reward is. I'm there, they're seeing that whole picture, and pretty quickly, you okay, sweetie? I know. Pretty quickly, I can remove that pre-placed reward and change to a dropped reward. So the reward starts in my hand, but after the dog has completed the obstacle, followed my handling, whatever the sequence is, I can drop the reward on the correct line. So the dog is getting rewarded next to me, but not from my hand. That's most of how I do most of my rewarding that way, because my dogs are fairly balanced, with a couple of exceptions. So I do most of my rewarding dropping on the line. It's coming from me. The dog is being reinforced for coming close to my line, but it's not from, like, they don't have to come close to me. I don't have to stop moving, all of those things. Then I am going to potentially use a pre-placed reward to proof my dog's behavior. So I might put the reward on the incorrect line and then try to reward to the correct line. And then the dog has to ignore the reward, follow me, and then I will either reward from my hand or spin around and let the dog go to the distraction. So I can be clever about how I use rewards to keep that balance intact. When you say from your hand, does that include a toss? So if I'm dropping it on the line, then it's coming from my hand, but I'm running along, running, drop, and I keep running. And then if I'm actually stopping to reward from my hand, it does not include a thrown toy. Or thrown food. They'll come in, they'll maybe bite the toy from my hand or take the food. Then if I want to do some like cookie tosses or toy tosses in between repetitions, that's okay. But in general, I don't reward agility with throwing toys forward in general. So let me know if that wasn't your question. All right, so we've been talking about handler and obstacle focus on a big picture overall level. Yeah, that's yeah, we got to start somewhere, right? What about dogs who are more obstacle handler focused at different moments on the course? Sometimes too much obstacle focus, too much handler focus, depending on what's going on. Then if it's situational like that, I would suspect it's not an obstacle focus, handler focus problem. It's what's causing the change. Is it that their obstacle focus or handler focus hasn't been proofed around certain obstacles? Because like I mentioned before, Smack has a super easy time ignoring a tunnel and choosing me over a tunnel. He has a harder time choosing me over weave poles. So sometimes we haven't reinforced the correct amount of obstacle or handler focus based on the other obstacles. So kind of unpack that with me a little bit. Because if my dog lacks obstacle focus because his weave poles aren't well trained enough, well, that's train their weave poles more. Or if they're not looking forward to find tunnels, train their tunnels more. So it could be situational based on the obstacle for either thing. But I also see it as dogs will suck into their handlers if they're feeling stressed or nervous. And dogs will go off and take obstacles when they're also feeling a little bit stressed, nervous. So in that case, working more on obstacle focus or more on handler focus isn't going to change the dog's reaction to a trial environment or a class environment. Okay. So I see it a lot. Dogs, if they're a little bit confused, they'll go off and grab tunnels. I don't think that's an obstacle focus issue. I think that's a confusion issue, and they're looking to release the tension somehow. So let me know if that's what you meant or if I went down the wrong tangent. Hey, sweetie. Yeah. What other questions do you guys have? Is that it then? Helpful, not helpful? Every time you take a drink, it reminds me I need to make one. Oh my gosh, go make a drink. I have a little bit more work to do after this. So sticking to the most sophisticated of the bubblies for now. How to continue to reward obstacles where you put the toy. If I'm just starting, I'll put it right behind the obstacle so that like, as soon as they land or they exit, boom, it's right there on their line. And then maybe I can find a video. Sometimes when I start to not have it pre-placed, I will toss it back to them so that as they're landing, the reward appears, but I'm so far away. I probably have a video of that. Deaf Pop is totally handler focused, and it's a bit of a struggle getting her to be more obstacle focused. So that's really hard, right? Because she can't hear you. So she's having to watch you more than normal. So just keep that in mind, that you might not get as much obstacle focus as you would with a dog that can hear. But I still think as long as you can stay within the dog's range of vision, so they've got like 240, I think. So as long as you stay within that range that she can see what you're doing, you can build this the exact same way as any other dog. What I think you might need though is a visual, some way for the reward to visually appear, right? So if you put a toy on the ground out in front of her, she's not going to know to go to it unless you go point it out to her. So you might have to build that in a different way, in a different way. Because when the dog can hear, I can just teach them that dish means go to the dish. But with a dog that can't hear that cue, I might want to teach them that if I step towards it, you're allowed to have it. So I'm going to start really close. I'm going to take one step. I'm going to maybe tap the bowl, make it like very obvious that they're allowed to eat. And then I'm going to slowly increase the distance so that when you take a step towards it, they're allowed to go. And when I'm seeing some confidence, then I'm going to start kind of proofing it. I take one step towards the bowl and then I run in the opposite direction. Does she still keep going? Or is she looking at you, not sure if she should continue forward? So I think you just have to break some things down and put it on a very clear physical cue, and you'll be fine. Ava, are you talking about the most sophisticated of the bubblies? It's blackberry bubbly, but it has a bow tie, so I call it sophisticated. All right. Looks like I answered that question. Lack of obstacle focus, and it's going to change. You might, so if you've got a young dog or a dog that's kind of new to agility, it's going to change. And it will balance out. So don't worry too much about it. Just try to remember you get what you reinforce. So if you're reinforcing a lot from your hand, you're going to get more handler focus. If you're reinforcing a lot from the obstacles or pre-placed, you're going to get a little bit more obstacle focus. How do you get them to not be so obstacle focused? Well, we talked about that quite a lot in detail. So if maybe you came in later, just watch the recording. So there's a big chunk on that because it's not a one size fits all. My dog's excessive handler focus definitely worsens when she's nervous. Yeah, that I see that a lot. And it's one of those things, like I wish that working on more agility and building up more obstacle focus would solve the problem. But it's one of those things going, yeah, well, so it might even make it, I think you can make obstacles more valuable, and that might help a little bit with the nerves in the ring, but that's not the actual problem. So you're not going to see major improvements without kind of addressing the why are you nervous type bit and then going on. Love following along on all of this because I have done zero agility ever. Excellent. Let me know then if I need to slow down or explain something differently, because I kind of talk like I'm doing a master class sometimes. And hopefully I'll pick up some of this and make different mistakes with upcoming Belgian. Well, yes, you are going to make mistakes. You're going to make different mistakes. It's fine. And we'll be here. Awesome. Okay, so I think we can wrap this puppy up. If you're coming in late or you're watching the recording and you have questions, just go ahead and start a new thread in the group. Someone will answer. I'll come back and answer. We will get it answered for you. And awesome. Thank you guys for joining me. And I will see you all next week. I have no idea what we're talking about. So if you have suggestions for that, drop them in the comments because I'm always in the need of a good idea. But otherwise, I will see you all later. Cheers. If I can figure out how to end this from here. Here's my finger one more time. Bye, guys.